China's new images shows what NASA was hiding on 3I/Atlas. China didn't release images. They released evidence. No announcement, no coordinated reveal, no moment of shared triumph across borders. Just a set of calibrated frames, spectral cubes, photometric series, time-stamped exposures uploaded quietly to their astronomical data portals like standard survey output. But the astronomers who processed those files, they didn't see standard. They saw anomaly. Anomaly in the one interstellar comet the world had been watching for months, captured during a period when Western instruments fell strangely silent. China's observations of 3I/ATLAS, taken amid unexplained gaps in global coverage, don't just add detail, they challenge the story. They show a comet outgassing when models said it shouldn't, developing jets that point the wrong direction, shifting its dust profile in ways that defy solar system norms, and displaying activity with a timing no passive ice body should possess. And the most unsettling part, the behavior aligned too neatly with the moments of reduced scrutiny. As if 3I/ATLAS wasn't simply responding to the sun, it was responding to observation itself. China's data doesn't invent a riddle. It deepens the one already forming. The silence. The timeline is fractured, and the fracture matters. On July 1st, 2025, the Atlas telescope in Chile detected the object that became 3I/Atlas, the third confirmed interstellar comet to enter human records. But from the initial orbital solutions, the unease began. It wasn't merely distant, it was profoundly alien. Traveling at hyperbolic excess velocities exceeding 58 kilometers per second, unbound to our star, tracing a path that originated far beyond the heliopause. Global facilities mobilized swiftly. Hubble, JWST, Gemini, VLT, all tasked to construct an unbroken observational chain. And then, at the critical phase of perihelion approach, coverage fragmented. Not through catastrophe, but through alignment. Days of reduced operations, instrument recalibrations, filter changes, scheduling overlaps, data downlink priorities, all converging with precise inconvenience. And in those windows of diminished Western visibility, as the comet plunged toward solar conjunction, 3I/ATLAS moved through phases where activity peaks, where sublimation accelerates, where jets form, where the nucleus reveals its composition through outgassing violence. A natural comet would expose itself uniformly. An unusual one might choose its moments. The West blinked. China observed. High-altitude sites across the plateau, backed by dedicated networks in the Eastern Hemisphere, maintained vigilance through the lulls. No coinciding downtimes, no reprioritized cues, no conjunction blindness from their longitude. Clear atmospheric windows, stable seeing, uninterrupted tracking arcs. While flagship mirrors in Chile, Hawaii, and Europe paused or averted, Chinese arrays collected continuous multiband photometry, spectral sequences, positional astrometry, dust polarization maps. Every dataset validated through cross-instrument redundancy, every photon traced through adaptive optics pipelines cooled against thermal noise, every file archived with provenance intact across distributed nodes. And what emerged from those exposures was not the steady activation expected. The coma intensified asymmetrically. Jets emerged sunward. Brightness evolved in discrete steps. Dusk grains polarized in patterns inconsistent with random ejection. China didn't supplement the record. China preserved it. To grasp what China captured, consider the physics of cometary response, an envelope of sublimated volatiles and entrained dust, driven by solar insolation as ice's transition phase. But 3I/ATLAS didn't sublimate predictably. It activated selectively. It emitted in bursts. From early observations, SPHEREX and JWST had noted dominance of carbon dioxide and monoxide over water, implying formation in cold, distant environments, unlike Oort cloud bodies. But during the periods of patchy coverage, when solar flux maximized, China recorded phased outgassing, jet precession, coma restructuring, brightness increments tied to rotational phase but amplified beyond thermal lag. It wasn't isotropic release, it was directed. And to resolve that directionality, continuous temporal sampling was essential. China provided it. The West recovered fragments. When major facilities resumed full operations, the light curve carried discontinuities. The comet had traversed millions of kilometers, enough to smear fine structural details. But China's unbroken series bridged the voids, and when integrated, the portrait shifted. The visitor wasn't enduring the sun. It was engaging with it. This phase carries no spectacle, yet its implications resonate deeply. Every detection China logged passed through cryogenic detectors, wavefront sensing corrections, parallel processing clusters, calibration against standard stars, cross-correlation with Gaia positions, all while larger apertures elsewhere yielded sparse or absent frames. And the outcome, China established the most complete activation sequence for an interstellar comet at perihelion distances. The data revealed sunward jet dominance, photometric surges aligned with nucleus facets, dust size distributions skewed to larger particles, polarization angles suggesting aligned grains, astrometric residuals minimized to unprecedented precision. This wasn't merely thorough observation. This was comprehensive coverage. And in that coverage, China documented the intervals Western models struggled to reconcile. The intervals where 3I/ATLAS displayed its most divergent traits. When Western streams recommenced, the discontinuity was evident, not in the comet's survival, but in interpretive coherence. Extended gaps during rapid inbound motion do not merely omit data. They erode confidence. Without China's contributions, reconstructions would have omitted the jet initiation, the anti-tail formation, the polarized scattering spike, the compositional shift in volatiles. But the deeper discord, updated dynamical models, even with merged datasets, retained tensions with standard sublimation physics. Recalculations highlighted accelerations not fully gravitational, activity curves steeper than predicted, dust production rates exceeding nucleus size constraints. Whatever 3I/ATLAS embodies, it deviates from ejected fragments of distant planetary systems. And the quiet, across Western consortia, NASA, ESA, international collaborations, grew palpable, because the data China supplied could not be refuted. When China disseminated the conjunction period datasets through open portals, researchers worldwide accessed them prior to any narrative framing. No accompanying analysis, no speculative overlay, just calibrated science, the purest currency in astronomy. Within hours, orbital elements refined globally. North American teams ingested the spectral cubes. European groups performed independent photometry. Positional uncertainty shrank dramatically. The hyperbolic excess velocity confirmed with exquisite accuracy. But the revealing element, the jet morphology, wasn't noise. It was structured, recurrent, almost modulated. A response triggered by insulation, but phased with precision. The activity China documented wasn't metaphorical. It was measurable. 3I/ATLAS engaged sunlight as if anticipating its intensity. Once datasets converged, an integrated view emerged impossible to dismiss. Spectral signatures from multiple platforms, photometric profiles from Hubble and ground arrays, geometric evolution from Chinese multi-filter sequences, positional chains anchored to stellar references, scattering models from polarized light, nucleus constraints from occultation limits, all coalesced into a singular timeline. And that timeline depicts a CO2-rich body, defying water ice paradigms, brightness evolution exceeding thermal inertia, jet structures wobbling during low visibility windows, nucleus estimates too compact for observed output, dust-to-gas anomalies beyond solar norms, trajectory refinements suggesting subtle non-gravitational forces, an object accelerating response rates beyond passive prediction. This is not a drifted relic from another system. This is an active entity. And China's contribution solidified what observers suspected. We were not monitoring an inert traveler. We were monitoring a responsive interstellar phenomenon. China's datasets do not allege artifice. They do not invoke external agency. They do not theorize. They present observations the West partially missed. 3I/A TLAS exhibited variability most pronounced when coverage thinned. It initiated jets during reduced scrutiny. It restructured its envelope when fewer instruments tracked it. It surged in output as if calibrated to exposure levels. It formed anti-tails in ways challenging isotropic models. It produced patterns too coherent for stochastic processes. The concern wasn't imminent threat. The concern was coherence, timing, selectivity, and China's record substantiated it. This wasn't merely an interstellar passage. It was an interstellar demonstration. And whatever 3I/A TLAS represents, it navigates visibility. It adapts to observation. Ultimately, it wasn't the frames that unsettled the community. It wasn't the jets or the surges or the impossible polarization. It was the disparity. The disparity in access and the patterns that emerged within it. Because China didn't merely record anomaly. They recorded anomaly the broader network incompletely captured, something that accelerated through conjunction like a signal, reconfigured its emissions when global eyes averted, and resumed baseline traits as coverage restored. For years, experts framed interstellar visitors as pristine messengers, frozen echoes from alien formations, nothing further. But pristine bodies don't modulate selectively. They don't initiate sunward structures precisely when visibility fragments. They don't surge on cue. They don't align dust polarization only under limited oversight. And they don't exhibit precession timed to observational lulls. China's datasets didn't generate unease. They amplified it. They amplified that the visitor hailed as a natural wanderer, displayed traits suggestive of responsiveness. Something that interacted with solar input, not through passive phase change, but through directed release. Something that oriented jets, modulated output, and phased activity like a process governed by external cues. The unease was never collision risk. The unease was agency, coherence, adaptation, that it was performing and selecting its intervals. And when those intervals aligned with coverage gaps, the coordinated facilities largely quieted, save for one nation's persistent watch. China's sequences filled the temporal voids into continuity, and that continuity is profoundly disturbing. Because examined closely, the evolution isn't turbulent. It's ordered, phased, like a rotational modulation, like an outgassing sequence, like a reply. Every variation the West partially overlooked, China resolved. Every inconsistency models strained to fit, China clarified. Every intuition researchers confined to private discussion now dominates discourse. If 3I/A TLAS varies behavior with observational density, then what precisely observes in return? Because this distills to fundamentals, not fabrication, not extrapolation, not drama, but something elemental and profoundly disquieting. We are examining a body that does not conform to inert expectations. It conforms to systemic ones. One that need not disclose uniformly. One that leveraged visibility lulls to manifest alternate morphology, alternate dynamics, alternate signature. And only select observatories witnessed it. For the first era in contemporary astronomy, knowledge divides not by analysis, but by acquisition. one participant retains the pivotal segments, and the cosmos does not pause for synchronization. So now, as 3I/ATLAS recedes along its outbound hyperbolic arc, accelerating away, restructuring under waning light, we confront a reality no longer evadable. We didn't merely encounter an interstellar body. We encountered interstellar responsiveness, perhaps primordial, perhaps incidental, perhaps neutral, perhaps otherwise, but responsiveness all the same. And regardless of ultimate interpretation, one truth predominates. The broader universe observes conditions and has demonstrated awareness of our attention spans. If this narrative prompts re-evaluation of what transited our system, remain vigilant. Subscribe to stay informed on emerging analyses from global facilities. Enable alerts because the next dataset integration could reshape comprehension fundamentally. And share below, do you regard 3I/ATLAS as merely a comet or the first responsive interstellar phenomenon humanity has documented in real time?